interesting perspectives. We're going to be talking about a topic that is actually quite a hot topic. I'm going to just give you three big figures. $10.5 trillion potentially in terms of global cybersecurity. That, to make it sizable, it represents more than the GDP of most countries, except the US and China. So that's a very first figure. We're moving from $24 billion in terms of security to 134 expected by 2030, so multiplying by 6. And more interestingly, in the era of AI, which is the topic of today, 40% of that is spent on AI-related cybersecurity. So with that, let me just introduce our two speakers here. Santiago will give us the perspective of a very well-placed practitioner related with a lot of companies globally, and Carlos will give us the investor's perspective. So let me just give you a first opportunity to speak. Maybe, Carlos, you can start presenting yourself and maybe giving a first view of how do you see the cybersecurity in the era of AI.
Sure. I'll be brief on the intro because then we will, of course, have questions. So, Carlos Alberto Silva here, managing partner and founder of 33 Ventures. We are a specialized cybersecurity investor based out of Europe, but investing globally, which is a bit unique in our ecosystem. Very glad to be here. AI is a tectonic shift. I think we are actually overlooking it, even though we are expecting a lot of disruption. But again, long term, I think we will see a huge transformation, and cybersecurity, of course, will be both disrupted in a part and will benefit from huge tailwinds on a significant part of the market.
Santiago, you're serving a lot of clients on that area. Can you tell us a little bit about your own take on the topic?
Yeah, thank you, Luis, and nice to meet you all. A pleasure to be here. I'm Santiago Fuentes, co-founder and CEO of Delta Protect. We are a cybersecurity company based in Mexico City. We have the chance to work with companies mostly in Spanish-speaking Latin America, so mostly from Mexico, Chile, Colombia, Argentina, Peru, Panama, even Venezuela. And it's really interesting because we have the opportunity working from micro startups to unicorns to banks to publicly traded companies. And I do believe cybersecurity and compliance nowadays work the same for any type of institution, right? Even though you have like a small tech ecosystem or digital assets ranging to like a super robust, complex digital ecosystem. So pleasure to be here and happy to share some words.
Excellent. So things are happening really fast in this context. Maybe taking first, Santiago, your own perspective on what has changed from the moment, generative AI became some part of our lives over the last 2 years. What have been the real shift that you're seeing coming over the last few years or months? Because that is happening fast.
Yeah, it's actually really interesting. We have all heard definitely of Mythos, right, and Project Glasswing, and I do believe for companies any size nowadays, it's really easy to understand the digital surface or the attack surface management of a company nowadays. So with AI, I do believe like anyone, even though you don't have a technical perspective, knowledge, background, it's really easy nowadays to understand what type of critical vulnerabilities a company can have, right? So both for attackers and both for defenders, I do believe it's really easy nowadays to hack a company, to understand the vulnerabilities of a company. And the thing over here, it's harder to companies to keep up with the latest trends and definitely to understand how can they protect or defend each other. So yeah, I do believe that. Talking about specifically of Project Mythos and about Project Glasswing, we all saw this model coming up. I do believe it was a publicity stunt made by Anthropic, right? But we had the chance to understand it and to see it, and we can see many open source models, not just Mythos, and it's really easy. So what I mean with this, it's easier nowadays for anyone to really have the tools to find vulnerabilities in companies.
Yep.
Good. Carlos, how have you seen this changing mood? And also, of course, from the investor's perspective, the hot topics that have been evolving over the last 2 years on the topic. And also, you talk about a lot of companies and you screen a lot of them. Are you seeing changes in those trends coming over the last couple of years?
No, definitely, and to the point of how fast things are are moving. Sometimes decades happen in weeks, right? That's the sentence that comes to mind. I think Midas exposed something that we in the ecosystem already knew for a while. It was a marketing stunt. I also agree with that. All of a sudden, everyone realized that how exposed we are. And cybersecurity, by its nature, is asymmetric. So you are the defender, you can protect everything you can, but then if you leave something open or vulnerable, the attacker will find it. And that's how things are unfolding. In cybersecurity is unique in several aspects. One is, whenever there's a new technology coming in, and AI in particular, it will bring dozens of new attack vectors. And that means, to your point, it will expand the attack surface. So you need more tools to protect yourself. That's point number one. Of course, you will benefit from the productivity coming from that technology. But then what's unique is attackers will leverage that technology to better attack you and to attack you more. And I think with AI, what's happening now is there's a third element here, which is the way to build the stack, the way to build the technology is also changing dramatically. So we as investors, what we are seeing, of course, there's this market need, but there's in moments like this, when the legacy solutions will no longer be enough, the client needs will be different, the way to build the technologies are different, that's when the new great platforms start to be built. So I think there's probably a lot of founders here. You are onto a unique opportunity to build something great, because that's when the opportunity comes.
Maybe just a follow-up question on that. To what extent do you feel in this construction of a Slack, the infrastructure is a key part? So how are you approaching the infrastructure aspect of AI? Are you investing in infrastructure, or are you thinking that that is part of the security element?
Yeah, definitely. So we are looking, and there's a, so of course we have companies with different, let's call it vintages, so years of, I'm at the board of a large private company in the US called Arctic Wolf. We were early investors in 2017, so now they are close to $1 billion in ARR. And of course, I can see the huge amount of investment and time that they are dedicating to keep up with the challenge on one side. And it happens the same with CrowdStrike, with Palo Alto, and you see not only the organic initiatives that they have, but also the acquisitions. So they acquire companies every day, almost. And then on the other side, we are seeing the new companies. And the new companies, the small companies, the starting companies, the way they are building the technology, the way they are approaching the problems and the challenges is completely different. So they don't have any legacy. They don't have hundreds of developers on the old world. They are building it from scratch. So they also have an advantage here. Of course, the big companies will try to defend. The other day, someone was asking me, will CrowdStrike disappear? And I questioned back, do you remember FireEye? Right? So it's one of those moments.
Yeah, thank you very much. Santiago, coming to this infrastructure question, to what extent do you feel this kind of sovereignty that you can build with infrastructure is part of the way to protect the cybersecurity aspect? Are you working on that as well? Are you collaborating with ecosystem players on that?
Yeah, I do believe, most important perspective point of view for me, it's either you have old infrastructure or new infrastructure. I do believe for cloud-based companies nowadays, it's definitely easier to scale a cybersecurity robust program inside your company. For legacy companies that have like on-site or like on-premise infrastructure, it's really hard to keep up to understanding what sort of information is out there about you, how hard it is to defend yourself nowadays for these type of companies, right? And specifically talking of infrastructure, we have all of understand or try to understand about quantum cybersecurity, and also for these companies, I see NVIDIA backpack over here, and trying to understand the potential about the threats, or what it's called the Q day or the quantum day. So keeping up with and the possibility to scale secure infrastructure, I do believe it's keeping easier for companies that are cloud-based nowadays.
Okay, good. You mentioned, and Carlos did as well, so but maybe I'll go first with you on that one. This asymmetry between attackers and defenders. Kind of, there's this say of attackers have one job, defenders have a lot of jobs, right? Yeah. So how do you feel about this asymmetry, and do you feel that's a gap that is going to change, or do you feel that's kind of a neck-to-neck race that is going to be exhausting always defenders?
So, it's like updating your software day by day, right? So what I do believe specifically about defending ourselves, it's first of all to understand what type of technology you have. Talking about mobile applications, web applications, APIs. So it depends on how robust your exposure is out there, right? But for some companies, I do believe it will depend definitely on what type of I don't know, so to keep up and really understand their exposure, right? I do believe, in terms of AI, right? And in the AI age, I do believe it will be a little bit easier, right, for attackers to keep up with these trends, right? You mentioned about CrowdStrike, and what I do believe it's really interesting. You've seen it in the past 2-3 months, the percentage of the market cap of these companies going down in the US, it's really critical.
Yep.
Yeah. How do you see this asymmetry? And is any side winning, or?
Yeah. So the asymmetry is I think it's fairly easy to understand. So on one side, you mentioned some figures, right? So on one side, the market, the spending in cybersecurity is approaching 300 billion, something like that. The size of the cybercrime is above 10 trillion. So there's a huge difference here, right? So, and we can understand the motivation of the attackers for this. And then when we think on historically as well, when attacking was cheaper than defending, there was war. And that's what we have now. So, of course, that this has also implications on the defense and geopolitical. So there's a race in itself for the AI leadership, and that also involves then continuous attacks at the cyber level, and I mean continuous. So they're from one side and to the other. So what we are seeing now is a continuous motion, attackers coming in, and barriers to attacks are lower. So in the old days, you would require experts, and they would take months to prepare an attack to go after a certain exploit. We are now talking about minutes. That's the reality of it. Now, for defenders, when you are defending, it's not like the game is over. No. It's like the lion, right? You don't need to run faster than the lion, but you need to run faster than the other ones being chased by the lion. So, of course, you need to, and it's definitely asymmetric. So you need, there's a few shifts in the paradigm that are now more clear. So you need to, taking the point of compliance, it's not like you need to go after your own vulnerabilities once a year. You need to do it continuously because the attackers will do it. You need to, of course, prepare yourself and then apply risk management to the vulnerabilities you have. You also need to be prepared to answer at machine speed because you will be attacked at machine speed. And that means that the old rule of dozens of people in a room looking at logs, alarms, and then trying to correlate all that, and then mean time to response of hours no longer applies. So,
yeah, you mentioned compliance. This has a purely regulatory side aspect. At least NIS2, DORA, and EU AI Act are part of this lack of regulation that affect all those companies. How do you feel those elements are part of the due diligence as well? How do you due diligence a company on the compliance side?
No, definitely. We look at that, but compliance is almost the basics. Because more concerning than the compliance, and of course you need to comply with regulators and you need to provide trust to your customers and your partners, but the attackers move faster than compliance, so you need to be protected on top of the compliance obligations. Funny story, so when Mythos came, and it was not so long ago, we had a huge company coming to us asking, and they of course reach out to other entities as well, because they were chased by the regulators asking them, what are you doing? And that was the time of Mythos and the Glasswing project and a lot of companies in the US, well, a few with access to Anthropic, to Mythos. And then they were in the middle of regulators on one side, making all these questions at the CEO level, and then they were asking Microsoft, they were asking CrowdStrike, what's happening? How can I protect in silence mode on the other side? So this has huge practical implications as well that need to be handled.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just adding up something interesting, in Mexico and in Latin America, we have this joke, compliance, that means comply and lie, right? So the problem I see, it's, and it's moving, right, from what's the minimum I need in order to comply as a cyber due diligence? I don't know if this is growing and you're seeing more. If I'm putting my money, if I'm investing in a company, I want to be secure that without the click of a button, this company will go to bankruptcy, right? So I do believe we are evolving from a comply and lie in order the minimum requirements to really build a scalable compliance robust infrastructure in order for me to be a business enabler, right? Because I don't know what's your perspective on this, but what we're seeing for other startups, if you want to sell to larger companies, to bigger companies, they will do, hey, I'm investing millions of dollars in our cybersecurity program. I don't want to get hacked because of a critical provider, right? So we're seeing a lot of trend over that. I don't know if you heard the story of this YC company called Delve in the US, Delve. They were doing compliance in 2-3 weeks, right? And it's not something about building policies, manuals. It's really about implementing robust cybersecurity controls in order to have a more resilience in order to, if you want to build something that scales and replicates, you really need to build it with a lot of security and compliance, and not just to show a document, right, or an audit, to really have it implementing inside your company. So I do believe what we're seeing moving this framework from ISO 27000 to DORA here in the European Union, what I would like to see if they're really understanding their risk assessments and how can they really mitigate this in order to scale their business operations.
Yeah, excellent. Let's turn a little bit to the room. The room is probably full of two types of people here, startups or companies and investors. Let's first take the standpoint of a startup. Most of the startups will likely not be cybersecurity startups, right? But there's a lot of things here that are affecting them a lot. What would either of you think would be the 2-3 things that definitely they need to fix on? Because that also derives attention from their main core business, but that is a super important thing to bear in mind. Carlos, maybe you can start 2-3 things that you think startups really need to be on the very first agenda.
Yeah, I'll probably will expand a bit more on the fundamentals and the structural shift that I see happening. So we are used to, when we invest in a company, we invest and we typically lead a round, and we invest for the next 18 months. So we put the money along with followers, the existing investors, we align with the founder, and this is the plan. And let's double down on the technology, on the roadmap. Let's, of course, work on the... We invest above 1 million ARR, so it's the time to go after the market potential we have in Europe. It's a huge market. It's one of the biggest markets in the world, so I'm not sure if we are all aware of that, but it's second to the US. Of course, it's fragmented, so we need to go over it. But I think what the biggest challenge that I see now, and I'm not seeing it now, but I think we will see it a lot, is your assumptions will change, and will change fast. because the way AI is disrupting everything, the way the AI will be adopted, you are onto something now that probably will shift dramatically in the next year or so. So you really need, and we hear companies and startups sometimes pivoting. So they start in one place and then they shift to other place. I think we will see that much more. So I think the race now to build a huge platform is a little bit more challenging, to say the least. It's like you really need to be aware of what's happening around you, right? So we are seeing companies like thinking on vulnerability management, thinking on these areas, particularly in cybersecurity, and the assumptions that they used and were true 1 year ago shifted dramatically today. So you really need to be aware of what's happening, not be in your bubble and thinking that you have the best product in the world. No, the needs and the way to build the technology is always moving and shifting.
How do you see the way to start for those companies that is not the core business, but need to bear in mind a list of items on the cybersecurity side?
What I would say over here, we've seen companies in Mexico raising a Series A, Series B, right, over 50 to 100 employees, and they do not even give a computer to their employees, right? So you're talking about securing cloud, securing applications, but even your employees don't have a mobile device management tool in their computer, an endpoint protection solution for being resilient to malware, ransomware, botnets, etc. So I do believe securing the employee, right, in terms of awareness, first of all, and definitely, and also like securing the information your employee has the chance to do so. I do believe that would be my first recommendation. The second thing we're seeing a lot is for companies building their own LLMs, for companies building their own solutions, like to really do security assessments involving, you probably heard of prompt injection, right? So many companies that have their own models don't have the logic behind their applications in order to be resilient to these type of attacks. That's something I would say so. And the third one, you mentioned it, Carlos, in terms of security application, right? So if you're building something, talking about web application, mobile application, to really do so understanding like, again, we saw it with open source projects, how easy it is to find critical vulnerabilities behind the logic of the business, right? Doing a source code review, trying to understand and fix those vulnerabilities, I would initially start on that. And on the other hand, and I mentioned it earlier, for companies that are cloud-based, right, we all think AWS, GCP, and Azure are really secure infrastructure, but the way we connect or we implement with these cloud providers, it's really critical, right? So doing a cloud configuration reviews, understanding the risk you have related to cloud, I do believe that's something early stage companies should focus on.
Okay, excellent. So we started talking about the last 2 years, and we already anticipated that it is going fast. So take your crystal balls out and try, Carlos, maybe to forecast what's coming. So what is the next big things that are coming? You already anticipated that we have to be ready for anything. But do you, can you think about things that you already see are coming?
Yeah, so focusing on cybersecurity again, I think one of the big areas that we need to protect is AI itself. So AI not only represents, in terms of market opportunity, a huge expansion. So there are some analysts saying that cybersecurity today is 5% of the IT budget. It will evolve to up to 10% of the IT budget. That's one thing. The other thing is, if you think on, and today, by the way, cybersecurity is critical. So it's the first or second highest priority in the budgets on one side, and then in a downturn is the least likely item for companies to cut for obvious reasons. Now, if you think on how AI is scaling through the, let's call it the wisdom pyramid, right? So you have the data, you have the information, you have the knowledge, you have the wisdom. And now what we are doing is pretty much protecting the data, so the basic elements. But companies will and this will happen, so I can tell you, so companies will replace and embed AI into their fabric. So the knowledge will be in the models themselves. So what I'm trying to say is that what you are protecting is now way more critical than the data alone. So your entire business can be stolen and replicated somewhere else and can be compromised. So I think there will be a lot of developments around this particular climb up to the pyramid, the wisdom pyramid.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much, Santiago.
Yeah, and I think for me, the World Economic Forum has stuck in through the last 3 or 4 years, talking about a cyber pandemic, right? In terms of, imagine talking about critical infrastructure mostly, telecom industries, the financial system worldwide, how critical it is for a massive or comprehensive cyber attack that can really affect, I'm talking about GDP, you mentioned a 10 trillion cost of a cyber attack. It's the third largest economy in the world talking about it. And what I would say specifically, it's and nowadays talking about vibe coding, right? And we understand Microsoft, Satya Nadella, CEO, mentioned 30% of the code they're building in Microsoft, it's being vibe coded, right? So who is auditing that code? Who is really understanding the vulnerabilities about critical infrastructure and how resilient we can be? And I mentioned it earlier, talking about quantum and post-quantum cryptography. I do believe critical infrastructure companies should really invest on it. So yeah, I believe more risks are coming, and for governments, there needs to be an intersection between government, academia, and private sector in order to build these resiliency models for the next 5 to 10 years.
Excellent, thank you very much. We're kind of running out of time. Just one last idea. If you want to give a key takeaway with the audience, what would that be, Santiago, among all the things that we have discussed?
I don't know it. Really understanding the fundamentals behind AI, and if you're implementing in your company, really understanding what are the associated risks of building these models inside your companies. And you have the responsibility, right? You're storing information about thousands or millions of users. You have a responsibility, and you really need to invest in protecting that information.
Carlos, your key takeaway for the audience.
I'll end with a positive note, okay? So it's not doomsday. I think I see it on the side of the opportunity. So there's a huge opportunity in the market today. Europe has a huge role to play here. Again, we compare very well in talent with the US. We have an amazing seed ecosystem. We have more developers than the US. So we have the market. We need to take advantage of this opportunity. The technology and the stack is being reinvented as we speak. So I think we cannot miss this opportunity. And I'm talking to the founders in the room.
Okay, I love that this is an area of risk, but I love the fact that you ended up with a positive tone and
I'm an
a great
investor,
opportunity.
so, yeah.
So thank you very much to both of you, and thank you very much for everyone for listening to this panel.